Hey.
Oh, yeah. It was, one of my first graders gave me this on the bus this morning. Thank you for being my bus driver, Ellis.
Ellis, we've heard about Ellis before.
Yeah, they had.
Yeah, we know about Ellis. Yeah, that's great.
Oh, made me cry.
That's very sweet.
I love
Now I'm gonna cry. I got the Whitney gene. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed.
I
I'm
call
always
it a wet
crying.
responder.
Okay, yeah.
Because yes, I have that as
I'm always
well.
like, someone introduces someone and I'm like,
Okay, we are back live. Thank you, Ellis. We were able to get Rachel Seelig. Please join us. And Jean Murray is here as well. I had asked Rachel and the folks from Legal Aid to, we've been talking about this, I guess, off and on all year long, at least in the voices in my head have. And, but we've been talking about it recently, both the eviction diversion program, a program as seen as envisioned in H391. But also, we took testimony from Judge Tour, talked about, and there was money put into what passed the committee in the Senate for rental rescue is the phrase they came up with, but that to me is almost the same as eviction diversion, because according to Judge Tour, she was finding that it matched the conclusion made in the 2019 report, speaking of past reports that still have legs on them, where a large percentage of eviction cases are usually due to back rent and can be solved with payment of that back rent at least once a year. And so this is a concept that's been battered around, but again, it hasn't been. So we're talking about that in general, but also I wanted that is something that would probably be housed in the Vermont State Housing Authority. Again, I talked about this morning as a reworking or a return to the CARES Act version of the rental rescue program that was put in place. But I also, more directly, the second half of this policy, it was full representation. And I asked Rachel to, and I want to ask you officially to be able to say, the eviction report that came out in 2019 focused on two counties, focused on Lamoille County and Windsor County. And so all of the statistics that were extrapolated were taken from those two counties. And so the idea that I've asked Rachel and Legal Aid to present us with a proposal next week is, can we discuss forming a pilot program rather than trying to say we should do this in all 14 counties all at once, to say, can we work with counties, in this case, that they've worked with before, so they have a baseline of understanding of what those two counties are like, and to have full representation on the days that the housing docket is done, or for tenants who are looking for representation. We heard from Judge Tour or Judge Zone about the success of having, in other jurisdictions, where the success of having attorneys on site or to help tenants to get beyond the pro se, even with advice from Legal Aid or from someone else. So that was kind of the ask. I'd like this, and I limited in my thinking to a pilot program because A, it won't be too expensive, but also B, it may prove, what is a pilot program supposed to do? It's supposed to develop something that may work, and it may not work, but we're not making a full commitment, but we want to see if the concept works in this proposal. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, maybe I wasn't paying attention. Would that go in S100 or would it be like a committee bill?
No, it would go in S100.
Okay, thank you.
So these would be our amendments to S100.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we've talked about it as a general, the phrases have come up as possibilities to discuss. So Rachel, consider yourself asked, but can you share what a full representation program would look like especially in those two counties? Again, the testimony we took is that there may be a housing docket twice a month or 4 times a month or what have you. But can you just, I need to stop talking and let you go.
Yeah, for the record, Rachel Seelig, I'm both the director of our disability law project at Vermont Legal Aid and our staff attorney for government relations. Can I put Jean on the record as well, just so she can jump into conversation? So this is Jean Murray, and Jean, can you introduce yourself?
I am the director of the Housing for Everyone Law Project, which is a project that's been funded and will be funded for 2 more years from the emergency rental assistance money. And so in that project, we send out letters to each and every tenant defendant all across the state. And we get a response rate about 30 to 40% of the tenants who are being evicted, and we give them whatever help we can. If you don't mind my saying, I heard Judge Tour, and she said there is a presence, especially in the counties and she works in, at the beginning of the case, but she notices a lack of presence at the end of the case and merits hearing, and that is true. Even with this funding that we have, we are able to help tenants do things like answer or make motions to dismiss, but we don't have the resources to be there for them at the merits hearing. And I believe Judge Tour when she says that could save some tenancies if we could be there at those kind of.
So there are kind of 3 of the different buckets that I think we're trying to talk about today. The representation bucket, the rent rescue bucket, and the eviction bucket. So I want to start with the representation bucket. We did some very fast math a while ago about trying to roll this out to the whole state. And our estimate is based on about 100 cases per attorney and 1,700 eviction cases expected to be filed, kind of at a minimum, right? Getting us kind of back to pre-COVID levels. And so that would be 17 attorneys. And I think your chair recognized that would be a lot of money to be asking for all at once without proving out the concept of the benefit we can provide, not just at the beginning of the case, but through the full case. So looking at Lamoille and Windsor, in the 2019 eviction report, there were 130 cases filed in the period, 136 cases filed in the period of time. I believe that.
It was the calendar year 2016.
Thank you, for calendar year 2016. And then that number dropped during the pandemic because of VRAP, because we were able to avoid about 400 evictions across the whole state completely, and then also resolve a number of evictions through VRAP. I think the thing that we worry about in this upcoming year is that the eviction rate may actually go higher than it was before the pandemic with the loss of VRAP. So when we look at those 2 counties and we estimate a little bit more than 200 evictions anticipated to be filed in those 2 counties in state fiscal year 24 that we're coming into, what we would be thinking about would be about 2.5 full-time attorneys and a paralegal to support that. And we'll get you the budget for that come Tuesday of next week. We've asked our financial folks for that, in addition to supervision for that team. What can that do? I mean, what that can do is build onto what we currently have the resources for, right? Like reaching out to folks, assisting them with doing what's called the answer to raise defenses that they might have against the eviction, and to be hands-on in helping folks sign up for programs they may very well be eligible for. And so this is where it connects to these other 2 pots, the rent rescue program and the eviction diversion program. So the rent rescue program, in our view, solves many of the cases that are filed for non-payment of rent, right? Somebody has fallen behind in rent and they need money, and then once they're caught up, they're gonna be able to continue paying their rent, probably for at least the rest of the year or the rest of the lease term. The eviction diversion program is not a benefit, it is a service, is I think the way that I would think about the difference between the two, and that we've been conceptualizing the difference between the two. And so what the eviction diversion program does is it makes sure that the parties, both the tenants and the landlords, have access to prevention services and programs, that there's a warm handoff to, for example, if someone is eligible for the HOT program, to the HOT program, or to the mediation program that the Landlords Association has had up and running since the start of the pandemic. And to other community resources that might be able to assist with, like if there's a utilities issue or a habitability issue, to get those kinds of problems solved, for cases that maybe aren't really just about money. So I think what we can do if we can fund this pilot is go beyond just that answer process and get to those merits hearings. And I do, generally, yes, if you are a person who does not have a lawyer in a merits hearing and you are up against someone who has a lawyer in a merits hearing, which is most of the time the case because 87% of landlords are represented. And it's about the opposite, about 13% of tenants are represented, if you're getting to that stage. So having a lawyer makes a difference. The lawyers know the rules of the court. They know how to get evidence introduced. They know how to elicit the testimony that's actually relevant to the issues in the case. And so, yeah, we do think that could make a difference. Again, the non-payment cases, if they're really just about money, we think we can resolve with money, right? So that what that's going to get us is, I think these things fit together because we need money to solve money problems. We need other resources to solve like human conflict problems. And then we need landlords we need landlords and tenants to have representation if we can't get those solved with kind of less involved problems. So do you want me to pause there and answer questions if you have questions, or yeah, I see questions.
So we're talking about resolution of cases that are not about money.
Yep.
Through the legal process, but there's also resolution through a mediation process or.
So mediation is always optional, and I think we would support keeping it an optional thing, that both parties would have to agree to participate in mediation. But yes, mediation can be a wonderful way of solving problems where there's like a human conflict element to it.
Do you see that as being built into this, or this would refer people to
The mediation program already exists. It's up, it's running, it's been running since 2020. So the eviction diversion program, one of the resources that it would be able to connect people to would be the mediation program. Yeah.
And the program, Jean, that you mentioned, what did you call it? The program that has funding until 2025.
Both the mediation program that's run by the Landlords Association has funding through 2025, and the current representation that we're doing in the HELP project.
Yeah.
We have funding through 2025, which we use that resource to help as many people as we can, and we give everybody who calls us some level of help, but we can't do complete cases for everybody who calls us. We don't have enough funding for that.
So we had some flyers on the table. I don't know where they went to, but we have the Vermont Legal Aid, or I'm sorry, the other BLA, the Vermont Landlord Association that maintains the mediation program. Again, it's voluntary. There's no money involved with it. It's not rent rescue. It's
as mediation is dispute resolution, right? I mean, it's a way of solving problems and settling cases, right? And that's a good thing. Money can be part of what gets settled, right? Like a landlord and a tenant could agree in a mediation that the tenant's going to provide this much money rather than that much money. but that's not primarily how we've seen it used. We've seen it used.
Right, so the mediation program, we worked on it, Landlords Association for Legal Aid worked together to put this together at the end of 2020. And so we trained 6 housing mediators. And so when people sign up for the program, the tenant has to be financially eligible because this is that emergency rental assistance program. But once the tenant is financially eligible, the payment to the mediator is free. Neither the landlord nor the tenant has to pay the mediator, free mediator. And the things that go to that program are people who, you know, I don't want to pay you your rent because you never plowed the driveway straight kind of thing. And work out, you know, real specifics that can preserve tenancies or figure out a civilized end to the tenancy or figure out how much money one party owes the other. Those are the things people get in disputes about. So that program is there, it exists, it's underutilized right now, which is one of the reasons why it would be nice to have an overall diversion program coordinator referring people to what might help them in that situation, so.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as the diversion, we'll discuss the larger bill, but at the very least, one of the issues is finding the home. And so,
Yeah.
again, based on the suggestion from Judge Tour, to say, well, perhaps it's working with VSHA to take an existing or, you know, a recently existing program and utilize that as the financial piece of it without it going. But again, this is part of the pilot program, I think, that starts with representation.
Yeah, I think the Rent Rescue Fund makes a lot of sense for the State Housing Authority to manage because they've been managing the VRAP funds this whole time. I think the eviction diversion program, we want to find a home from that's neither a landlord nor a tenant or a tenant advocate, right? Because we want it to be kind of more of a neutral entity. So one idea that we presented is the Office of Economic Opportunity. Another idea would be using 211 because people go to 211. Again, I think that's one of the things that's important about distinguishing the rent rescue program from the rent rescue benefit from the eviction diversion program, right? Because anyone, you know, whether there's been a notice to quit, whether there's been a summons and complaint, could go to eviction diversion and get referred to these resources. When we think about the Rent Rescue Fund and kind of going back more towards the model that we had at the beginning of the pandemic, there needs to be an arrears. We're thinking about that as being eligible because you're in arrears, you're behind in your rent, and you've gotten that summons and complaint for eviction, right? So that's going to be a smaller world of people than all tenants who might be kind of at risk of eviction, who maybe could access multiple resources, not just the Rent Rescue Fund through an eviction diversion coordinator or program, if that makes sense.
I've got it's a tangential question. Is that all right?
Sure. Thank you for warning you.
I was wondering whether foreclosures are ever included in these discussions.
So, yes.
I realize they're
and
a lot
no.
more they're a lot more complicated legally, but.
So they are more complicated legally. We have a separate program and separate funding stream to help people who are facing foreclosure. That is also pandemic era. That one ends sooner than the program that we have for tenants. So that one will come to an end, I believe, in December of this calendar year. Which is one of the reasons we asked for some increased funding for legal aid, because we do see that as being a continued need. There is a relationship, though, between eviction and foreclosure, which is that once you've lost your foreclosure case, the bank takes your house and they evict you, right? And so those do become eviction cases as well. But there's a lot of process in those foreclosure cases first.
Sorry, didn't mean to sigh out loud.
You know, by chance, have 2.5 attorneys and a paralegal working in the foreclosure
We don't,
is losing its funding.
no. Wouldn't that be so smooth? No, no. We don't see this as like just replacing that program yeah, no, would it be so simple?
So we have invited you back on Tuesday.
Yes.
Along with the Vermont State Housing Authority.
Yeah.
And I have asked you to,
We're gonna have
Make a
numbers
presentation,
and
yeah.
presentation for you then. This is really more of like an introductory or reintroductory, because I know we've talked about this all a few times, session. And I apologize because I have to go train some new lawyers for about half an hour. So I have to run out of here and find a quiet place to talk to them. So
you're saying that there's new attorneys being let out on the world and
there are.
you've given them a half an hour of training.
Well, we've given them, they've gotten a whole week of training this week, but my part is a little half-hour part. So.
Okay, well, thank you for making the time.
Thank you. so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. I wish I had more time for you all today, but I look forward to being back with you on Tuesday and
Yeah.
we'll have more for you then. So thank you for
Thank you.
your time.
We can stay on. So, committee, one of the things that I would, before we go. Jean, were you gonna stay or are you gonna head out?
No, I can stay for 15 minutes.
So I'm gonna ask you to, can you slow down a little bit, because I wanna go over the whiteboard and I don't wanna step on you. So where are those things?
This is the fun part.
So I just wanna, we've talked about bits and pieces. So I just wanna write up on the board, bits and pieces. I won't use that phrase, but, I want to talk about what's in the bill that we're focusing on. What are the things that we've talked about as possibilities to add to S100 as kind of what the to-do list is going to be for next week. I want you all to just know.
Cass, can you see?
We'll take a
We'll
picture
take a
and send.
picture.
Yeah, but I was gonna ask if you guys could I'm listening, and if you guys could take a picture, that would be great.
We got you.
So in S100, the Senate bill, which includes, and I'm including not just what passed, but also what got cut out. And then what we want to add. So we need to add language, maybe, consider adding language and just review. And then, did I spell that way wrong? Ron, what is this? Oh, no, that's okay, yeah. Sorry, you're not gonna be able to read my writing, but, everybody says that. Add language, add money. What else was in the Senate bill? It's kind of a quiz too.
Oh, Kayla?
Oh, okay.
Wait, sorry, Tom, you said,
In
there was,
40 some odd sections, is quite a lot of it.
No, I don't care about the
Okay.
zoning stuff, I'm just carrying, I mean, for the sake of this argument, I just wanna know what are the main topics? We had fire safety stuff.
Would that be with the ADU definitions?
Yeah. Which is in there, but that's, I mean, we're gonna review the language piece by piece,
We're
but.
just doing chunk.
So there was a
chunk.
fire safety things where the director was not crazy about the chore of doing a study, but would do it if we asked. And then the ADU was part of that, I think, for public accommodations. Then there was the auditors
Oh, right, yeah.
language, which we gave it a pretty high thumbs down.
Yeah.
And then there's a fourth piece that besides, and that's just of what we know is in there, and then there's gonna be, we've got cut out, and that's in the section by section, which is money for, missing middle.
Well, I don't think there was any missing middle money. There was RLF money. But they never included the missing middle money.
Was RLF language S100 as passed, or did that get cut too?
I think I think.
No, it got cut.
When they appropriations stripped it out, it was in there coming out of the first two committees. RLF was, missing middle was not. I think missing middle is only in BAA right now.
Well, there's missing middle housing. Like, again, we were going to our budget number we approved, we requested they support 20 for, well, you have the second
Yeah, it says section 36 replaces the missing middle pilot with the missing middle homeownership development program. And then section 37 appropriates 20 million
Right.
for
That's
that.
housing and not the rental.
Right.
I have the rental in there as well.
And then the housing the rental is in here as well at 20 million.
Right, and then, so middle income.
And by rental, you mean the revolving loan fund?
Yeah.
Right, and I mean, there's a whole bunch of, the rent rescue money is in there, it's all the money. So when we do this bill next week, when we get to the point of going section by section, starting at whatever 25 and then looking at these sections that are in the section by, from what passed the committee, we're gonna be making decisions about putting the policy back in, because some of it matches. And we are also at the point where, yes, we paid so much attention to the budget before crossover, and it's been voted over and it's over there now, but if there are things that are in this bill that aren't in our budget, we can still put them in.
Okay.
We can still put them in, and we'll get into the conversation with, obviously with appropriations, and we'll share this as we're going along.
Great.
With appropriations to say, okay, we did all that work before crossover, now here's this stuff. Can it fit in? And a lot of that we put a lot of money in, there's a lot of money requested here. There's VHCB money requested in here as well, I believe.
Yeah.
So we all have that. We'll get that up there next week, but we have all that in the section by section from February 20.
There's also the change in definition of first generation home buyer and a request
yeah,
for
right.
a million, additional million.
Right. Kath had her hand up, but now it's down. Okay.
All right. So we'll fill this in with what passed the committee stuff. The things that I'd like us to consider, we would like to consider, I'm not the only one in the committee, but I'd like to consider the Bill of Rights. I'd like to consider eviction diversion. If we can get concepts and language.
And that's the pilot program?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then full rep. This would be more, again, money to the State Housing Authority. And again, changing the language of that program so it's not as restrictive as it has been under the BREP program. What else? I know I've asked Representative Labor to look into this H21, which was the notice of utility disconnections.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
184.
184, yep.
What's that?
Lead paint.
Paint.
What was it?
The
Lead paint.
painting.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I don't, the land, and also the landlord painting situation.
It's I'm now required to spend $3,000 a year to get a certification, but not insurance, because the insurance isn't available to me because I'm not a professional painter. Bill.
Yeah, that's a priority one for me at least.
Yeah.
The adding money to VHIP for the people who want to house
Home share?
the home share.
So one of the things that we heard about while you were absent was just that we can continue working on it. It may not be fixed until next year, but the idea of shared home providers aren't landlords.
Right.
And they don't have a landlord-tenant relationship. And what Commissioner Hanford was saying is that VHIP is such a landlord-tenant oriented bill. It's all written about that.
Right.
And so creating a category for shared living providers just requires more care than just saying, but there's also programs, I mean, we can continue to find where are the programs that we could do this to, and one of them might be Vermont Center.
Well, but I have two other ones. One is, which I think is your bill, the one that adds to VHIP, funds for making a dwelling accessible.
Yes, and I think we talked generally about adding the word accessibility to the VHIP definition in here.
And the other one is, I'm sorry to be relentless about it, but requiring universal design for any new dwellings. Because if we're gonna build all kinds of new housing, now is the time to get it added.
What bill number is that? Do you know offhand?
No?
Okay, it's fine. You know what it is.
Kath has her hand up again.
Kath?
Just a really broad question about when and where, any question about expanding housing for disabled adult Vermonters lives. I know that's a really broad, vague question.
It is a broad, big question. We just got the material on that from the Disabilities Council this past week. What their bigger plan is, that we got a report and we haven't read it yet. But I think what they're looking for is a second year of this biennium program, because we need to understand. And when I've reached out to people in the department and to the committee, it's AHS's a warren of places where money and programs may be that we don't understand yet in terms of being able to help.
Yeah, I think this stuff is good. We talked a little bit about like the Bill of Rights and understanding whether it goes to this. I kind of think it might be more germane on 103. I do worry a little bit about germaneness, and just like I have a little bit of a concern. I don't want our work on this bill to just be like adding in more money and adding in new programs. Like I want us to tackle the zoning, and the committee in the Senate tackled that zoning. I want to tackle the same zoning. And so I just want to make sure that we have time to like amend zoning language, which I understand is controversial in this building, but I'm also like not really willing to like cede that right, which I feel strongly we have. So I just want to make sure that on our list, which could be a long list, that we're not just talking about what are the new programs or the bills that we're going to hang on this vehicle. Those things are cool, but like I want to have it side by side with like the zoning language that came out of Senate Economic Development and Housing. Really take a close look and add some of it back in, because like we said, we could never understand all the nuances of Act 250. Neither can our Citrus committee. We've got a perspective on that zoning that's unique, and I'm kind of beating a dead horse there. I just want to make sure that it's on the board, because it's going to be a lot, right? Like, and I think it's just a couple of sections, but I think that it's we're going to need Ellen's help on it.
Well, the other help I would like, if you can suggest people, we don't have time for 50 people to teach us about any particular.
I think the league would be great to get back. I know the league's working on this very actively.
But we also need, like, if we're spitballing ideas like your four unit thing, your 4-unit idea that it doesn't count against 1055, I don't know who to call and say, like, the concept, I can understand the concept and say, hey, that's great.
Right.
Like I could say, hey, zoning, no Act 250 in downtown designated areas. That would be fabulous. I get that. But I would like to know, if I don't know as much about the stuff. I wanna know if this, again, using the Jenga thing, I wanna know if we put something in, does it tear it down in a way that isn't proper?
Right.
And I think, which is, I think, it's not a technique, it's a reality of some of the complexities of Act 250 in particular. But if there's somebody that you know that would help us understand what is possible
Yeah.
in our way, that will be very helpful. Then we can let them know.
Get some testimony. Well, I think that like what I would like to do in that area is get some language drafted, and once we have it in front of us, hear from people like the league, but also hear from people like the Home Builders Association, and to ascertain, try to prove the concept that such a move would, on one hand, spur the kind of like small scale development that we think is sitting on the sidelines in our communities, and to maybe use that as a way to incentivize communities to have permanent zoning we want to see. And then also, for sure, I think it would be good to understand, maybe it's from folks at VNRC, maybe it's from their smart growth folks. I'd love to hear from the VNRC smart growth folks to say, is there a consequence that we are not considering of this kind of internal reconfiguring of what counts towards that 10.55? Because I'm sure that there are some concerns that people would have all around, but I do think that a group like VNRC, who's clearly been leading the charge in some of those concerns, but also has a smart growth coordinator, would be maybe a good person to come in. And I do think that the testimony they might provide to this committee, especially in the context of that kind of policy consideration, might be material that different than the testimony they give down the hall. And so I think it's important we get it.
I think we could also ask to hear from regional zoning commissions. I know somebody who actually probably would love to come in and speak to us.
Chip, sorry.
Sarah Had.
Yeah.
She's one of the most knowledgeable people I know regarding this, and I agree with Representative Elders. I think it'd be really beneficial for this committee.
Okay, so let's again write down a list let's get a list that we can refer to and see if they're going to be available. But we still have to work on the full schedule.
If we approach zoning, could we please talk about making allowances for disability parking?
Yeah.
Spaces.
Yeah.
Senator James has her.
Emily, then Kath.
Earlier today, since it's fresh in my mind, the commissioner was talking about incentives for accessibility. I don't even know where that would go, but I like that idea.
Yeah, it'll go here.
Okay.
All right. Representative James?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate everything Rep. Elder said, and I appreciate the Jenga philosophy, but I just want to make sure that, and Chair Stevens, this will be up to you, that we're, buttressing the thoughtful work we're doing on our half of the bill, but not working at cross purposes to our companion committee. Just raising a red flag about that as well.
What do you mean cross purpose? Would you just mind spelling that out a little? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're using any testimony and deeper understanding of zoning to make sure that we're doing careful work on our part of the bill. And so that we don't have two committees working at the same time on, the same parts of the bill. Do you see what I'm saying? So they're doing sections 1 through 22. We're doing 25 through whatever. And I think we need to do thoughtful work on our part of the bill with whatever information we need in hand to do that, and not make sure that we're, working on parallel tracks on their part of the bill.
Yeah, I just kind of think our parts are all mixed up. I don't think we have I don't think we can, but I hear what you're saying and I appreciate your take. I disagree. I think that those are our parts of the bill. I think the whole bill's our bill. But I appreciate, thank you for clarifying that, Kath. I appreciate that.
I will. We may agree to disagree, but
It sounds like we do. Yeah.
But that's not for you and I to decide.
And we'll keep working through it, because I'm not, I'm interested.
Individually, it is.
No, we're interested in getting our voices heard, how we get to do it in the amount of time that we have. Yeah, next week.
So just running us through, so we have, I hear it has to go to 2 more committees after this, or 1?
It has to go to the energy and environment, then it's gonna have to go to appropriations, and if there's any taxes or fees that
Okay, that was the
don't
third
think
one.
there are,
Right,
then it would go to ways and means, but
I couldn't figure out the third one.
if we're adding the policy and the money back into the proposals, then this is obviously everybody knows this is going to appropriations.
Got it.
Yeah.
No,
And maybe a joint hearing would be good. We've talked about that.
yes, and
You know.
that's on, I am trying to schedule a meeting with the chair.
Yeah, I
No.
support that.
But if we don't work on if we don't work on the zoning sections, I'm unlikely to support the bill. I'll just say it that clearly. I'm unlikely to support this bill if we silo those sections and don't touch them. I don't see how I could support it. It's too important.
Just on process?
What?
Just on process rather than content?
On both. I think that process that I'm describing is the only way I can see the content matching the need of our constituents. And I think that if we do not meet the needs of our constituents in that fashion, then we are letting our process rules deny the people of Vermont the policy they need. And I'm not willing to do it. I think that we can see very well what these siloed policy jurisdiction areas have yielded over the last years, which is very, very little, and I'm not prepared to do it again.
It's really hard for us to make policy decisions without knowing how those zoning implications are going to undermine what we're coming up with, or whether they're going to support it or harm it, if it's even feasible, because it's not even allowable in the zoning restrictions, what we're trying to do. So it's really important to have that understanding. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent. And just as a proud parent of this committee, I do appreciate the conversations. You guys are really getting it, and it's really, you've come a long way since January, just in terms of understanding it and really understanding how I like to have the committee run, which is, as much as I talk, I don't want to talk it. Next year, I don't want to talk at all. But I want to come with that. I'm sorry, what was that?
It'd be challenging.
You don't want to hear it.
Doesn't mean I won't crack a whip. But it's, anyway, let get Larry.
Much of the improvements that has got onto and advising would involve a lot of changes to an archaic 50-year-old process called Act 250. It's antique, it needs remodeling. And there were parts of the witnesses' testimony here that pretty well documented that. I think Act 250, whether we call it that or whether we call it another name, really should be remodeled and looked at heartily, because it involves zoning for the towns or cities. I don't care what designation it is, especially sewage waste.
Yeah, and it's the third rail of time, and what some people think is reform, other people think is reform, is how they think about it is right. And I think Act 250 reform has been dealt with unsuccessfully over the last 4 years. Never mind the last 50 years.
Right.
But anyway, it's there was a big Act 250 study. It wasn't a study, it was a statewide listening sessions and whatnot. I know that was in 2018 or so. So,
And since then, we've had PFAS or PFOA. We've had radon. We've had DEC involved with failed waste systems. And then PCBs, which hit a bigger community. You're looking at multi-million-dollar repairs.
and the tension between Act 250 and zoning rules is what's, we talked about, and how it affects housing.
Yeah.
Is what this argument is because, if we were to stereotype people, we would need, oh my God, affordable Section 8 housing, we have to have, we can't have a 12-story building in our community. That would violate our town character, as opposed to somebody saying we should never build another, again, I'm being very stereotypical here of just saying, we should never build another building again. And, we should never be anywhere near a river, and we should never be anywhere near a mountaintop, and all the stereotypes that we hear about what the problems with our regulations are. And so there is no doubt there's a tension. There's been a tension. Again, how do you build? I don't necessarily ascribe to the 40,000 unit number.
Big number.
It's a
very large
It's a
number.
big number. I don't think we, even if we had the capacity to do it, at any rate, doesn't matter. We need more housing. And the idea of starting with where the sewers are is reasonable. It's just a question, does this language, does the language that's in here under the Jenga category, does it do damage? What are the intended consequences? What are the, we will never know what the unintended consequences are, because if we can think of them, then they might be intended. So anyway, with that, let's go home. Go enjoy the weekend.
Good weekend, everyone.
Enjoy
Happy
the
Passover, Ramadan.
Birthday to your daughter.
Thank you. We're excited to celebrate.
How old?
She's turning 2 on Sunday.
Oh, yay.